70,000 empty buildings. That's how many abandoned structures sit in Detroit right now. To put that in perspective, there are entire cities that have fewer than 70,000 buildings total. Detroit has that many sitting empty. This was once the fourth largest city in America, the highest median income in the country, the center of American manufacturing. So what happened? How does a major American city end up with an entire city's worth of abandoned buildings? And more importantly, who's responsible? This is what happened. Who made the decisions and who profited while a city died? 1950, Detroit is the fourth largest city in America. The population has risen to over 1.8 million people. The city has the highest median income in the country. Detroit is the center of American manufacturing. The big three automakers, Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler, employ more than 300,000 people directly. Millions more work in supporting industries. Detroit builds half the cars in America. For Black Americans fleeing the Jim Crow South, Detroit represents something rare: economic opportunity. During the Great Migration, hundreds of thousands moved north to work in auto factories. They build homes, start businesses, and create thriving neighborhoods. Black Bottom and Paradise Valley become cultural and economic centers. Black-owned shops, theaters, restaurants, nightclubs where musical legends perform every week. This is Detroit at its peak, a symbol of industrial power. But then, the federal government decides to build highways. 1956. President Eisenhower signs the Federal Aid Highway Act, the largest public works project in American history. 41,000 miles of interstate highways connecting cities across the country. The goal: modernize transportation, connect suburbs to cities, and move cars faster from A to B. But in Detroit, the highways are routed through specific neighborhoods, not around them, directly through them. Interstates are deliberately routed through Black Bottom and Paradise Valley, the two most thriving black neighborhoods in the city. This isn't accidental. Urban planners and city officials choose routes based on where land is cheapest and where resistance will be weakest. Black neighborhoods meet both criteria. The official term is slum clearance. The reality is demolition of functioning communities. Over the next decade, more than 130,000 people are displaced, homes bulldozed, businesses destroyed, entire streets erased. Black Bottom never recovers. Paradise Valley is gone. Generational wealth built over decades vanishes in a matter of years. And while black neighborhoods are destroyed, federal housing policy is actively financing white flight. While highways cut through black Detroit, another policy makes sure white residents can leave. Redlining. The federal government's own maps mark black neighborhoods as hazardous for lending. The Federal Housing Administration refuses to insure mortgages in these areas. Meanwhile, the FHA subsidizes mortgages in newly built suburbs with low-interest loans and minimal down payments, but only for white buyers. Developers openly advertise whites-only communities. Federal policy backs them up. As the tax base shrinks, city services decline, schools lose funding, police response times increase, maintenance stops. The worse things get, the more people leave. A death spiral. Then, in July 1967, the city explodes. A police raid on an unlicensed bar in a black neighborhood sparks 5 days of unrest. 43 people die, thousands are arrested, entire blocks burn. The riots are a symptom of decades of inequality, but the media coverage treats them as proof that Detroit is dangerous. By 1970, Detroit is losing population and revenue, but the city still has one thing keeping it alive: the auto industry. But the 1970s oil crisis changes everything. Gas prices spike. American consumers start buying smaller, more fuel-efficient cars. At the same time, Asian automakers start gaining market share. The big three respond by cutting costs. That means closing factories and moving production. Roger Smith becomes CEO of General Motors in 1981. Under his leadership, GM closes 11 plants across the U.S., with 7 of those facilities located in and around Detroit. It relocates its factories to other suburbs, southern states, and eventually to Mexico, where labor is far cheaper. As a result, Detroit and its surrounding areas loses 140,000 auto jobs between 1980 and 1990. Chrysler follows the same playbook, so does Ford. By the 1990s, Detroit's manufacturing base is gone. The city that once built half of America's cars can barely sustain itself. And just when Detroit thinks it's hit rock bottom, the bank arrives. 2008, the financial crisis. The housing market collapses nationwide, but in Detroit, the collapse is catastrophic. Between 2005 and 2015, 67,000 properties are foreclosed in Wayne County. Banks specifically target black neighborhoods in Detroit for subprime mortgages. Entire blocks empty out. Families who owned homes for generations lose them in months. And then, Detroit creates its own foreclosure machine. While banks foreclose on mortgages, the city forecloses on property taxes. In Detroit, you can lose your home for owing as little as $500 in unpaid taxes. Between 2011 and 2015, more than 100,000 properties are tax foreclosed. Many of these are occupied homes, people living in houses their families owned for decades. And here's the key detail. Detroit deliberately overassessed property values. Assessors inflated homes far above market rates. Poor residents were charged taxes on imaginary wealth. A study by the University of Chicago found that Detroit overassessed residential properties by as much as 85% between 2009 and 2015. When residents couldn't pay, the city took their homes. Then Wayne County auctioned the foreclosed properties. Wealthy investors buy dozens of properties at a time for a ridiculously low price. They then flip or hold them and wait for the city to recover. Between 2008 and 2015, Detroit residents lose an estimated $7 billion in home equity. And while residents lose everything, one man is quietly buying up the city. Dan Gilbert made his fortune in mortgage lending. Quicken Loans becomes one of the largest mortgage companies in America. In 2010, Gilbert moves Quicken's headquarters to downtown Detroit. He's praised as a savior, an investor betting on the city's future. Through his real estate company, Gilbert acquires more than 100 properties in downtown Detroit. He buys most of the buildings during the foreclosure crisis when prices are at a rock bottom. Gilbert benefits from massive tax breaks. The city gives him millions in subsidies to renovate buildings he already owns. He's praised for revitalizing downtown, and downtown does improve. New restaurants are opening, big tech companies are moving their offices into Detroit. Luxury apartments are being built for the wealthy. But the revival is limited to a few square blocks. The neighborhoods where most Detroit residents live see none of it. Therefore, there are now 2 Detroits. One for investors and one for everyone else. And the people who survived everything are now being priced out of the recovery. As of 2026, Detroit's population is around 649,000. That's a loss of more than 1.1 million people. More than half of the city is gone. Although the city has grown slightly for the first time since 1957, over the past 2 years, and downtown Detroit is more modern and attractive than ever before, appearances are deceiving. Headlines call it a comeback story. The media loves the narrative. Detroit, rising from the ashes. But drive 10 minutes in any direction, the city looks the same as it did in 2008. To this day, there are 70,000 empty buildings in Detroit, 31,000 empty homes, and 90,000 vacant lots. And in the few neighborhoods that are recovering, longtime residents can't afford to stay. Property taxes rise, rent increases. Black families who survive the collapse are pushed out by the recovery. The poverty rate in Detroit is a minimum of 31.5%, making it one of the top 5 poorest cities in the nation, with populations over 65,000. The median household income sits at $38,000, which is half the national average. The median home value is at $106,000, one-third the national average. Life expectancy in some Detroit neighborhoods is 69 years. 10 miles away in the suburbs, it sits at 82. People like Dan Gilbert invested billions of dollars in downtown Detroit. His investments have made downtown Detroit more attractive and modern than ever before. But what actually changed? The poverty rate is still one of the highest in the US. The median income is still half the national average. The empty buildings are still there. So it's more than fair to ask, are the billion-dollar investments in downtown Detroit actually making a difference? Or is it just another way for the rich to get richer?